Welcome to Divine Inspiration. Today we embark on a journey through one of the Bible's most awe-inspiring stories, Joshua's remarkable leadership, his steadfast faith, and the incredible victories God gave him. Imagine the weight of responsibility on his shoulders as he took up the mantle from Moses, charged with leading an entire nation into the Promised Land. There were towering walls, seemingly insurmountable challenges, and battles on the horizon. Yet Joshua, armed only with his unyielding trust in the Almighty, witnessed wonders beyond human understanding. He didn't just see waters part, he commanded the sun to stand still, and the fortified walls of Jericho came tumbling down. This story is a powerful testament to what happens when one walks in obedience and unwavering faith, even when faced with overwhelming odds. Before we dive deeper into this extraordinary narrative, don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you won't miss any of the inspiring stories we share. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up and leave your thoughts in the comments section below. And of course, share this video with your church group, family, and friends, so we can spread these powerful lessons of faith and perseverance. Now imagine yourself standing before a vast, roaring river. The waters are fierce, surging ahead, seemingly intent on keeping you from reaching the land you have long dreamed of. Behind this river stands a fortified city with towering walls that seem designed to crush any remaining hope you have left. What would you do in such a moment of despair? Now picture Joshua, a leader chosen by God to lead a nation through such overwhelming obstacles. A man whose faith and courage allowed him to face challenges that would make most men give up. How did he break through these barriers? What gave him the strength to bring down walls and conquer mighty armies? Get ready for a journey where faith itself is the most powerful weapon, and obedience to God is the path to victory. In the scorching wilderness, under the blazing sun, walked Joshua, son of Nun. He was not someone the world might expect to lead an army. He was raised in the shadow of Moses, a humble man of few words and more of a quiet observer. But God's ways are often mysterious, and it was this thoughtful, quiet man that the Lord chose to lead the people of Israel into their promised inheritance. From a young age, Joshua displayed remarkable bravery. He was one of the 12 spies sent to scout the Promised Land. While most returned filled with fear, only he and Caleb brought back a report filled with hope and confidence in God's promises. Perhaps it was this unwavering faith that drew God's favor, or perhaps it was his heart, ever attuned to the softest whispers of the Almighty amidst the noise of life. With Moses now resting in eternity, the immense responsibility of leading the nation rested on Joshua's shoulders. Imagine the overwhelming pressure of stepping into the shoes of a man who had spoken face to face with God, parted the Red Sea, and led the people of Israel to the very brink of the Promised Land. The weight of leadership was crushing, but Joshua wasn't alone. The same God who had been with Moses promised to stand by Joshua's side. But even with this divine assurance, doubts and fears crept into Joshua's mind. His first great challenge as the leader of Israel was fast approaching, and the shadows of uncertainty gathered around him. As night fell over Israel's camp, Joshua sat outside his tent, gazing at the stars that seemed to silently witness his inner turmoil. Tomorrow, difficult decisions would await him, and the heavy mantle of leadership pressed hard against his chest. The voices of elders and warriors echoed in his thoughts, making rest elusive. Yet in the midst of the noise, a familiar voice broke through. It was the voice of God. "Be strong and courageous," the Lord commanded, not as a suggestion, but as an order. These simple yet profound words reignited a fire of confidence within Joshua. God hadn't promised an easy journey, but he had guaranteed his presence. To Joshua, that was worth more than any army or weapon. He understood that true strength wasn't found in the physical body, but in a spirit fortified by faith. However, God's command came with its own challenges. The walls of the Promised Land were not only physical barriers, but also symbols of fear, uncertainty, and doubt. Joshua would have to lead a people who often wavered in their faith, who longed for the familiar comforts of Egypt instead of the unknown of Canaan. With God's promise burning in his mind, Joshua rose, ready to confront whatever lay ahead. But the trials of leadership loomed large. As Joshua and the people approached Jericho, the full moon cast eerie shadows over the imposing walls of the city. Jericho stood like an impenetrable fortress, seemingly daring anyone to challenge it. Joshua knew that in order to claim the promised land, Jericho had to be confronted. But brute force alone wouldn't be enough. Wisdom and divine strategy were just as crucial. With a heavy heart, Joshua sent two of his most trusted men to scout the city. It was a dangerous mission, where every corner held the potential for disaster. Disguised under the cover of night, the spies managed to enter Jericho. However, they quickly realized that the risks were far greater than expected. The city was on high alert, with guards patrolling as if they could see even in the dark. Then something unexpected happened. As the spies searched desperately for a place to hide, they found refuge in the home of a woman named Rahab. She was an unlikely savior, a prostitute living on the margins of society. Yet with quick thinking and incredible courage, Rahab became the lifeline that kept Joshua's spies safe. She hid them under bundles of flax on her roof while Jericho's soldiers scoured the streets. Despite the pounding of her heart, Rahab's determination never wavered. She sensed that the arrival of these men signified something much greater than herself, something that could change the fate of her city and perhaps her own destiny. At the break of dawn, as the first light began to spill over the horizon, Joshua stood at the edge of the Jordan River. Its waters, swollen from the seasonal rains, rushed powerfully, blocking the path of the people of Israel. The Jordan River was the final obstacle between them and the Promised Land, the land that had been promised to their forefather Abraham. How could they possibly cross such a tumultuous river, especially with children, the elderly, and livestock in tow? With his heart anchored in the promises that God had spoken to him, Joshua knew this was yet another trial of faith. Resolute, he commanded the priests carrying the Ark of the Covenant, a symbol of God's presence, to step forward into the river. The people watched in silence. Some were filled with anxiety, while others had hearts renewed with belief in the miracle they knew was coming. As soon as the priests' feet touched the rushing waters, a miracle unfolded before their eyes. The waters stopped as though held back by an unseen hand, forming a massive wall of water upstream. The riverbed lay dry and safe, just as it had when their ancestors crossed the Red Sea. With a mixture of gratitude and determination, Joshua led the people across the dry land. Every step they took was not just a physical journey, but a spiritual one, moving them closer to the fulfillment of God's promise. On the other side of the Jordan awaited Jericho, its towering walls still a daunting sight. A confrontation was inevitable, and under Joshua's command, the Israelites began their unique strategy. For 6 days they marched around the city once each day. No weapons were raised, no battle cries were shouted. Only the sound of rams' horns echoed eerily against the stone walls. Jericho's defenses, thick and tall, seemed unassailable. Initially, the city's inhabitants mocked the Israelites. However, as the days passed, unease crept in. The silence and the strange ritual unnerved them, as if Jericho's fate was already sealed by forces beyond their control. On the 7th day, everything changed. At the first light of dawn, the Israelites marched once more. This time, they circled the city 7 times. With each lap, the tension grew heavier, like the stillness before a storm. Joshua's eyes remained fixed on the walls, waiting for the signal. At last, the trumpets blared in a long, sustained note, and Joshua raised his hand, giving the long-awaited command, "Shout!" Like a roar of thunder, the people's voices erupted, and the very walls of Jericho began to tremble. Stone by stone, the seemingly indestructible city crumbled, brought down by the power of faith and obedience. Yet Jericho's miraculous fall was only the beginning. Though victorious, Joshua soon faced a harsh new reality. The battles ahead would test his leadership in ways he hadn't yet imagined. After the triumph at Jericho, the Israelites advanced toward the city of Ai, a much smaller and less fortified target. Confident in their success, Joshua sent only a small contingent, trusting that God would once again deliver them a victory. But what followed was a crushing defeat. Against all odds, the men of Ai repelled the Israelite attack with ease, sending Joshua's troops into retreat. The news of their loss spread quickly throughout the camp, replacing the fire of faith with fear and doubt. How could God allow such a failure after their great victory at Jericho? After this devastating defeat, Joshua was left shocked and deeply troubled. In a state of mourning and distress, he fell to the ground before the Ark of the Covenant, tearing his clothes in sorrow. Desperate to understand the reason for their failure, Joshua cried out to the Lord. God revealed to Joshua that a man named Achan had violated his command by secretly taking items from Jericho that were meant to be consecrated to the Lord. This act of disobedience had tainted the entire nation's blessing. Joshua, with a heavy heart, knew what needed to be done. He brought Achan forward before all of Israel, and the sin was confessed. Though the truth was exposed, the price was steep. Justice required that the people be cleansed from this disobedience before they could move forward. Achan and his family were punished, and Israel was purified of the sin that had caused their defeat. With this burden lifted, Joshua faced the difficult task of restoring his people's trust, rebuilding their faith, and reaffirming his own confidence in God's promise. The next steps were critical, and the tension within the camp was palpable. Despite the setback, Joshua understood that God's plans were still in motion and that they would prevail if they remained obedient. With renewed determination, Joshua led his people to conquer Ai successfully. This victory marked a turning point, restoring the Israelites' confidence that God was still with them. As news of Israel's victory spread across the land, fear began to grip the surrounding nations. Some of these nations, seeing Israel's strength and realizing they were favored by the Almighty, sought ways to protect themselves. It was during this time that a group of men arrived at Joshua's camp, their clothes torn, sandals worn, and their appearance ragged. They claimed to have come from a distant land, seeking peace with Israel. "We have heard of the power of your God," they said, their voices tired yet sincere. They begged for a peace treaty, and their appearance seemed to support their story. Focused on the upcoming battles and eager to avoid unnecessary bloodshed, Joshua saw an opportunity to secure an alliance. Convinced by their ragged appearance and earnestness, he agreed to a treaty without consulting the Lord. However, the truth soon emerged. These men were not from a distant land, as they had claimed, but were actually from Gibeon, a nearby city that feared for its survival. They had crafted a deceptive plan to secure their safety. Upon learning of the deception, Joshua was deeply troubled. How could he, the leader chosen by God, have been so easily misled? And what would this mean for Israel? Despite the treachery, the treaty had been made in God's name and therefore had to be honored. Joshua kept his word and spared the Gibeonites, but this alliance would soon bring more challenges. The surrounding cities, feeling betrayed by Gibeon's alliance with Israel, began plotting war. At dawn, as the sun painted the sky in hues of orange and red, the sound of trumpets filled the Israelite camp. News had come. 5 Amorite kings, furious over Gibeon's alliance with Israel, had united their armies to attack the city. Joshua understood the urgency of the situation. Without hesitation, he rallied his warriors and marched through the night to defend their new allies. The journey was grueling, but the Israelites knew that the fate of Gibeon, and perhaps their entire campaign, hung in the balance. They arrived at dawn, catching the enemy by surprise. The battlefield erupted into chaos, filled with the clash of swords and the cries of warriors. In the heat of battle, Joshua did something extraordinary. He looked to the heavens and made a request that would forever cement his legacy in the annals of biblical history. "Sun, stand still over Gibeon, and moon over the valley of Ajalon." In a miraculous act, the sun stopped in the sky, allowing Israel more time to secure their victory. Time itself seemed to bend to Joshua's command. The day stretched beyond its natural course, as if the very sun and moon had halted in obedience to his unwavering faith. This prolonged daylight gave Joshua and his warriors the advantage they needed to achieve a decisive victory. The enemies, shocked and unable to comprehend what was happening, were swiftly defeated. The name of the Lord was glorified throughout the surrounding nations, and Joshua's reputation as a leader of unshakable faith was firmly established. But with each victory came new threats. Joshua was well aware that the remaining kings were watching, plotting revenge, and preparing to launch new challenges against Israel. As the battles raged on, Joshua continued to lead with wisdom and courage. But after days of relentless warfare, the time came for reflection and critical decisions. The dust of war still hung in the air, but the quiet in the Israelite camp signaled that something significant was about to take place. Joshua, now a seasoned leader, knew that the time had come to divide the promised land among the 12 tribes of Israel. This was a monumental moment, the culmination of years of struggle, faith, and obedience. Sitting before the map that outlined the contours of the conquered territories, Joshua took a deep breath. This was a pivotal moment in Israel's history. The leaders of each tribe waited anxiously, watching closely as the man who had led them through countless victories and losses prepared to distribute the land. With steady hands, Joshua began to allocate the territories. The tribe of Judah was given its portion in the lush mountains, where prosperity was promised by the green hills and fertile valleys. The smaller tribes, such as Benjamin, were assigned their own fertile and strategically important regions. Joshua made his decisions with great wisdom, ensuring that every tribe had the resources it needed to thrive and that peace would remain among the people. However, this was no easy task. With each decision, whispers of discontent could be heard, glances that hinted at ancient rivalries between the tribes. Old grievances threatened to resurface, and Joshua knew that maintaining harmony among God's people would be one of his heaviest responsibilities. The alliances forged in battle would now have to withstand the trials of peaceful coexistence. Even though the land was now divided, Joshua had one last duty to fulfill before he could rest from his burdens. He knew that he needed to call the people together one final time to remind them of the sacred covenant they had with God and the promises that still remained. As the sun dipped low, casting a golden glow over the hills of Canaan, the people of Israel gathered once more. This time, there was no sound of war drums or battle cries, only the solemn silence of a people who had witnessed the fulfillment of God's promises. Joshua, now older, with the marks of time and war etched deeply into his face, stood before the crowd. His eyes, still burning with the fire of faith, swept across the sea of faces before him. Elders, young warriors, mothers, and children alike. All were present to hear their leader's final words. Joshua knew that this moment would perhaps be the most important of his leadership. It was no longer about conquering new lands, but about keeping Israel's heart true to their covenant with the Lord. With a voice filled with the weight of wisdom and experience, Joshua spoke to the people. He reminded them of all the great things the Lord had done for them: the plagues in Egypt, the parting of the Red Sea, the crumbling walls of Jericho, and the many victories that followed. He spoke of the promises that had been fulfilled, the land they now called their own, and the blessings that came through faith and obedience. But Joshua's message was not one of celebration, it was a warning. "Choose this day whom you will serve," he said, his voice echoing across the hills. "Whether the gods your ancestors served beyond the river, or the gods of the Amorites, in whose land you now live. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord." His words pierced the hearts of the people like an arrow. Joshua understood that the real battle ahead would not be physical, but spiritual. The land was filled with temptations and foreign gods, and the choice the people made at that moment would shape Israel's future. As a murmur of agreement spread through the crowd, Joshua knew there was one more act to perform, something that would cement this moment in their history and ensure their commitment to the Lord for generations to come. At the break of dawn, the city of Shechem stirred, wrapped in a peaceful calm that felt almost sacred. The green hills surrounding the city seemed to bear witness to the gravity of the occasion. Joshua, with firm and resolute steps, led the tribes of Israel to gather beneath the expansive sky. This was the moment for the people to reconnect with their roots, to recall their journeys, and to reflect on the promises that had sustained their faith. Seated in organized circles, the Israelites listened closely as Joshua began to recount their history. He spoke of Abraham's calling, the miraculous deliverance from Egypt under Moses, the wonders they had witnessed in the desert, and the mighty walls of Jericho that crumbled before their faith. These stories were not mere tales of the past. They were living lessons on trust, obedience, and the continuous presence of God among them. As the sun rose, casting its golden rays over the camp, Joshua emphasized the importance of maintaining their covenant with the Lord. He reminded the people of the blessings they had received, but also of the challenges that still lay ahead. The land before them was the result of their perseverance and faith, but it also required that each tribe stay united and committed to God's commandments. With the soft whispers of the wind and the distant sound of the Jordan's waters creating a serene backdrop, Joshua's solemn words urged the people to choose whom they would serve. He reminded them that their faithfulness to the Lord would be the foundation for their future prosperity and harmony in the Promised Land. As the sun reached its highest point, Joshua felt the heavy responsibility resting on his shoulders. He knew that after this gathering, the actions of the people would shape the destiny of Israel. Joshua gazed toward the horizon, aware that the greatest challenges still lay ahead, not in battle, but in remaining faithful to the path that God had set for them. Time seemed to stand still as Joshua, the aging leader, looked over the vast expanse of the Promised Land, the hills, rivers, and valleys that were now in Israel's possession. Every piece of soil held a story, a memory of battles fought, promises kept, and above all, the invisible hand of God guiding his people. Joshua understood that his days were drawing to a close, yet he knew that his legacy was just beginning. He would leave behind more than just a divided land or conquered cities. He would leave a seed of faith planted deep within the hearts of every Israelite, a faith that would carry them through future generations. He understood with the wisdom of age that the miracles they had witnessed, Jericho's walls falling, the sun standing still, might one day become distant stories, recounted around campfires with less intensity than they had lived through. Future generations might not remember these wonders with the same fervor. Thus, Joshua's final words became more than just advice. They were an urgent plea, a call to never let the memory of God's acts fade from their hearts. "Always remember," Joshua began, his voice carrying the weight of a lifetime devoted to God. "Remember everything the Lord has done for us, how he brought us out of slavery, guided us through the wilderness, and gave us this land. Do not let these memories fade. Teach your children and their children that it was our service to the Lord that brought us here." His words were more than a call to faithfulness. They were an act of love and responsibility. Joshua knew that future challenges would be different, perhaps subtler than the wars they had fought, but no less dangerous. Though the land was at peace, the temptations, distractions, and false promises of the surrounding nations could erode the spirit of the people if they turned away from the path God had set for them. Joshua planted his final seed of wisdom, hoping it would grow into a nation that would thrive, not just in power and wealth, but in faith and justice. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in a golden twilight, Joshua looked upon his people, understanding that the true battle for Israel's soul was just beginning. With these final words, he sealed the renewal of the covenant at Shechem, raising a great stone as a witness to the people's commitment to God. Though his strength was fading, Joshua felt a deep peace within. Joshua's life was one of the most inspiring accounts of faith, leadership, and divine intervention in the Bible. He was not just a military leader, he was a man of deep faith who trusted God at every step, even when the odds seemed insurmountable. His journey began in the shadow of Moses, the great prophet and leader of Israel. From a young age, Joshua had shown immense courage, being one of the 12 spies sent to scout the Promised Land. While most of the spies returned filled with fear, Joshua and Caleb came back with a message of hope, demonstrating their unshakable faith in God's promises. When Moses passed, the immense responsibility of leading the Israelites into the Promised Land fell on Joshua. Stepping into the shoes of a man who had parted the Red Sea, spoken with God face to face, and led the people out of Egypt was no easy task. The weight of this leadership was daunting, but Joshua knew he wasn't alone. God had promised to be with him, and Joshua's faith in that promise never wavered. The first great test of Joshua's leadership came at the Jordan River. The river, swollen from the rains, stood as the final obstacle between the Israelites and the Promised Land. With unwavering faith, Joshua ordered the priests carrying the Ark of the Covenant to step into the river. In a miraculous act, reminiscent of the Red Sea crossing, the water stopped, allowing the Israelites to pass through on dry land. This marked the beginning of Joshua's leadership and a powerful testament to the divine guidance that would follow him. But the greatest challenge still lay ahead: the city of Jericho. A fortress with towering walls, Jericho seemed impenetrable. However, God's instructions were clear. Instead of attacking the city with brute force, Joshua led the people to march around its walls in silence for 6 days, blowing trumpets and trusting in God's plan. On the seventh day, after marching 7 times around the city, Joshua commanded the people to shout, and in a miraculous moment, the walls of Jericho crumbled, allowing the Israelites to conquer the city. This victory was not just a physical one, it was a spiritual triumph, demonstrating the power of faith and obedience to God. However, the story of Joshua also reveals that even the most faithful leaders can face setbacks. After the triumph at Jericho, the Israelites suffered a surprising defeat at the hands of the much smaller city of Ai. Devastated and confused, Joshua sought God's guidance, only to discover that a man named Achan had disobeyed God by keeping spoils from Jericho that were meant for the Lord. This act of disobedience had tainted the entire nation's blessing. Joshua took immediate action, confronting the sin, restoring the people's faith, and leading them once again to victory. As news of Israel's victories spread, the surrounding nations grew fearful. A group of men from Gibeon, pretending to be from a distant land, deceived Joshua into making a peace treaty with them. Though Joshua had been misled, he honored the treaty, and when the Gibeonites were attacked by other kings, Joshua defended them. In one of the most extraordinary moments in the Bible, during this battle, Joshua prayed for the sun to stand still, and it did. The extended daylight allowed the Israelites to achieve a decisive victory, further cementing Joshua's legacy as a leader of unshakable faith. But Joshua's role was not only that of a conqueror. After years of battles, the time came to divide the promised land among the 12 tribes of Israel. This was a delicate and crucial task, as each tribe had to be given its rightful inheritance, ensuring fairness and unity. Joshua's wisdom and sense of justice shone during this process, as he carefully allocated the land to maintain peace and stability. As Joshua grew older, he gathered the people for one final, significant moment. He reminded them of all that God had done, bringing them out of Egypt, guiding them through the wilderness, and giving them victory after victory. He urged them to remain faithful to the Lord and to make a choice, to serve the gods of the past or to commit to serving the Lord. His famous declaration, "As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord," has echoed through the centuries, inspiring countless generations of believers. Joshua's story is more than just a tale of military conquest. It is a journey of faith, trust, and obedience to God. His leadership, courage, and reliance on divine guidance serve as a powerful example of what can be accomplished when we trust God fully, even in the face of overwhelming odds. Joshua's life reminds us that no wall is too high, no river too wide, and no battle too fierce when God is with us. His legacy lives on, not only in the victories he won, but in the deep faith he inspired in the people of Israel. Joshua teaches us that true success comes not from human strength, but from faith and obedience to God's will. As we face our own challenges, we can look to Joshua's example and be encouraged that, with God, we too can overcome any obstacle and reach the promised land in our own lives. Joshua entrusted the future to the people, confident that he had fulfilled his mission. With that, he withdrew to the hills he loved, ready to rest in peace, trusting that the work he had begun would be carried on by future generations. And so, Joshua, the faithful servant of God, passed from this world, leaving behind a legacy of courage, faith, and devotion that continues to resonate through the ages. His life stands as a testament to the fact that with God, even the most formidable obstacles can be overcome and the greatest challenges conquered. As the people of Israel moved forward into each new day in the Promised Land, they carried with them the living memory of a leader who never hesitated to follow the divine call. This story reminds us that true courage is born from faith and that unwavering dedication to God's path, even when it seems difficult or unclear, always leads to victory. Joshua's example teaches us that following God's commandments is the key to overcoming the toughest challenges and reaching the promised land in our own lives. What an incredible journey of faith and obedience we've just witnessed through the life of Joshua. His story reminds us that no wall is too high, no battle too difficult, and no challenge too great when we have God on our side. Joshua's faith didn't just change the course of Israel, it shaped the destiny of generations. As you reflect on this story, remember that the same God who stopped the sun for Joshua is with you, ready to help you overcome your own challenges with unwavering faith. If you were inspired by today's message, make sure to subscribe to Divine Inspiration for more amazing lessons from Scripture that will encourage and uplift you. Don't forget to like this video and leave a comment sharing your thoughts on Joshua's incredible story. And most importantly, share this video with your church group, family, and friends so they too can be strengthened in their faith. Together, let's continue growing in God's Word and walking the path of faith and victory. May Joshua's legacy inspire us all to trust God completely, even when the road ahead seems impossible.